So, hello. I hope everybody's having a great day wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing. This is 50 pips rocking and rolling here, 20th of May, 2018. No trade calls, no recommendations or response for their own stuff. We're here for educational purpose only. So, what's happening? We got a lot of stuff on deck this week. I mean, we do have some interesting data points. More so out of the UK, inflation report hearings. We've got some CPI data. We got Carney speaking, and we're going to have that GDP estimate, etc. But we also had Fed minutes on Wednesday, and we do have some stuff out of the ECB. So there is some stuff coming out, but really the focus is going to be on how markets react, what's going on in the world in terms of geopolitical risk, what's going on in DC. So there's a lot of possible headline risk this week. I think the focus is going to be here trying to distill this into the key charts is, first of all, possible uncertainty out of Italy. And that could cause, especially in a quiet start of the week with a lot of countries having a bank holiday, could lead to a little bit of jitters. So I think that's probably going to be the most interesting thing to watch at the beginning of the week. If you look at basically the Italian market, the big question here is we've kind of like Euro, we were going sideways in this range, and now we've topped here again into the 200-month moving average. And the big question is, now that it looks like the government has said, it looks like they're going to try and go ahead with their reforms, whatever, has this peaked? So this is going to be very, very interesting. Have we put in a high on the FTSE MIB? And is this going to come back down? Is that going to mean that the spread between the BTPs and the Bund is going to continue to widen? Is that going to bring in some interesting trading opportunities? That's one thing I'd keep an eye out for, especially for the traders focusing on EU session that are trading London Open. Another thing which I think a lot of people, I haven't seen too many people talk about that, but you have to keep there in the back of your mind, is basically what's going on Deutsche Bank. Like if you look at Deutsche Bank here, essentially, let's get rid of this 200. We've had a very, very ugly close, right? If you look at this basically here, see where we've closed? This is a new closing low. Very, very heavy. New closing low. I mean, we've gotten lower, but we didn't close lower. You can see that also on the weekly. We've printed lower, but we ended up closing higher. And I think not enough people are paying attention to this. If something ugly happens here, then the market is going to have to pay attention. I think the big psychological level, I mean, don't ask me why, this just tends to work that way, is the 10 mark. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons why, stocks start trading in single digits, a lot of things happen. But basically here, I'd keep an eye on this. If this does not catch a bounce, and if you see this approaching 10 or trading below 10, markets are going to pay attention. So I think this is the second thing you have to keep in mind. Third thing is again, emerging markets. We've been seeing a lot of wheeling and dealing in the emerging markets, and they're not looking too pretty, right? They're not looking too pretty. So the big question is, are they going to bounce? And the question is, if they bounce, this is a big level. This is a really interesting level for them, right? See, we've been back below, and this level has kind of saved them quite a few times in the past. So this is another piece of the puzzle for this week. See how heavy we're trading. If they're going to bounce, we're likely going to get some kind of a bounce here. So I think apart from the traditional charts that we look at, is you want to keep an eye on possible Italian headline risk, you want to keep an eye on Deutsche Bank, and you want to keep an eye on EEM. Now, EEM is, of course, linked with the USD, and you can't really talk about that without talking about bonds. Now, if you're looking at the ZBs, if you remember, we've been very, very bearish for the ZBs for a long time, right? Since essentially pretty much mid of last year. We're starting to get very, very bearish once we start to press here back already in 2015, when we were trading those 65s. Now, essentially what's happened here is we consider this pretty much a completion of this channel, right? This channel's been, this goes back to 2000s. and etc. And essentially what's happened is we've come back down, we've got that bounce back into mid got sold, front running the 50 back, and now we're moving down in extensions. The 123 extension is coming back here. So as much as we would not be surprised to see bonds trading lower, if anything, and if you look at the price action that we put in on Friday, it looks like this is where they may attempt to bounce. Now again, we've been short, we've been playing the short side for a long time, and as far as we're concerned, we consider the trade done. Okay, it doesn't mean it can't go lower, but we consider the trade done. We consider the risk reward of staying aggressively short here done. If we bounce, then that's a different trade. But for right now, if you're holding shorts, we consider this done. So this is the other big thing to keep an eye out for, because if these bounce, of course, big implication on the USD. So again, number 1, Italy, number 2, DB, number 3, emerging markets, and number 4, essentially that's going to be linked to the ZBs and what that's going to mean for the USD. And if you're looking for some kind of a correction of the recent USD move, what we continue to favor in terms of charts, should you be interested in playing that, is a possible bounce on Aussie dollar as we're trading back down into these lows. If we're going to bounce, this is where we feel we've got the best chance of bouncing. We already tried to get some kind of bounce action, and it's not really it wasn't happening, and now it looks like it may be finally happening. As long as these 75s hold from a day close, week close, we expect the next move to be back towards 76, 76 77s, and we think this is that possible correction, and it's still only going to be a correction for now. And the other chart where we think we've got the nicest, the trades are already in play, asymmetric risk reward, and we've talked about this for quite some time, is basically on Swissy, where you see we're trying to base here, we can't press higher, and it looks like now we're trading a little bit heavier, right? Trading below this channel. As long as we trade below here, we don't get any closes back above these highs, we think that the path of least resistance is lower. Now, the channel is always a good guide, but should things get a little bit uglier, it doesn't necessarily have to, the channel is the quickest move, but, this could easily set up a much bigger correction. So I think these are really the most interesting things for, and again, if you're interested in a lot of detail or going into all the charts in detail, just look at our daily webinars we hold, because that's the place to go into a lot of detail on all these things and the relationships. Now, another chart a couple of people asked me about is a chart we've been posting for a long time, is Google, and it's just not looking pretty, right? It's just not looking pretty. So we'll have to see. I think as long as we hold above the 1,000, broadly speaking, it's, nobody's really going to panic. But I almost see this 1,000 as the 10 mark on DB. Okay, the 10 mark on Deutsche Bank is probably a lot more dramatic, but I see it as a switch in the same way, right? So if this continues to play out, still think there's not going to be much panic as long as we hold this. But psychologically, if we start to trade back below the 1,000, a lot more people are going to start to be paying to this attention, that a few people are attention to this pattern and this weakness that a lot of people are already focusing on. And again, speaking of the market, without going into detail on all the indices, because I want to try and keep these short, if you look at the ES, we're still kind of stuck. Now, this is also a thing a lot of traders struggle with, right? This is a waiting game, right? A lot of it is a waiting game. Now, as much as everybody, if you read a book or listen to a podcast, everybody's going to talk about their best trade, their worst trade, or when they're trading. But what a lot of people don't talk about is just that a lot of time is just spent waiting, right? Chopping around. So here, what's happening on the ES? Well, nothing much, right? The whole, all these days we've just been hovering here. It's just a little bit of a wait and see game. So as long as we continue this pullback, and as long as the bulls can hold it back above this 2,700, above this whole area where you've got the 100 DMA and the 50 DMA, as long as they can hold this, then realistically, the only thing you can look at is the market trying to take a good stab, rotate back to the 28,000. Now, whether that means all the way back higher, that's a discussion for later. For now, as long as we hold this broader zone, especially from a weekly close, the 2700, and there's support on any dips below into this 50 DMA here, then the path of least resistance is likely for the market to try and retest higher. If this gives, and if we start to get daily closes below the 50, I think it's probably still it could be quick into the 200, but it's still going to be in fairly choppy ground. Now, if you get a move back below that 200 with something silly happening in terms of geopolitical risk, in terms of something silly happening in emerging markets, if you get that happening on Deutsche Bank trading below 10 or something like that, then it could get very ugly very quickly. But again, we're not there yet. So that's pretty much what we're looking at going into this week. Hope that was useful. As always, thank you for all the guys who are retweeting this, liking and sharing it. Don't hesitate to hit me up on Twitter. I always enjoy the banter. If anybody has any chart they want me to look at, if I have a minute, I'm more than happy to post it. But again, if you want to have a detail and look into all those things, that's what we do pretty much every day. So come by and have a look. So have an awesome one. Thank you so much. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.